Do we need to send fewer criminals to prison? Get your calls in for this one now. The former Justice Secretary David Gauke has completed an official review into the justice system in England and Wales and has found that successive governments have over-relied on prison sentences and a desire to seem sort of tough on crime. He says that this approach has pushed prisons to the brink of collapse and also fails the victims of crime as justice cannot properly be delivered. Do we need to send fewer criminals to prison? Fewer prisoners to criminal? Fewer criminals to prison.
We should have fewer criminals. That is what we should have.
All right, we've wrapped that up nicely. Lovely. Okay. But since we don't, and we seem to have a few criminals, should we be sending them to prison?
So my opening answer is yes, but it's a nuanced question. And I think that successive governments have approached this question in almost a dangerous fashion because they think there's a one-size-fits-all for all criminals. Like, obviously, in the case of, violent assault, in murder, obviously people need to be in prison, and that's because they're not safe to be out in the street. But this sort of blanket approach of, oh, we're going to be tougher on crime, we're going to lock people up, doesn't work for most people. And you've got a situation at the moment with this over-bloated prison population that are full of people like shoplifters, full of people who simply don't have anywhere else to go, people with extreme mental health difficulties, all behind bars at enormous cost to the taxpayer. And when they go back out into society, they are not cost beneficial. They're actually worse than when they first went in. And so there should be a more nuanced approach to who goes in and who should be eligible to, say, mental health help or a more holistic approach to recovery.
Do you agree with that, Albie?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it is just so inappropriate to be talking about fewer people going to prison at the moment with the crime problem that we have in this country. We've got a 20-year high of people shoplifting. 2 million crimes went unsolved last year in this country. Lots of theft going on. Ava, do you want to tell people why it is you walk around with your phone like a necklace?
Because you're showing my, good, I've got it on Do Not Disturb. We could have revealed a few things there. Look.
Why is it that you wear that?
Because, there is a
because
severe problem with crime in London, and there's a severe problem with the Met not arresting people who are stealing phones. If you wouldn't believe the number of phones that are being stolen in the capital at the moment.
And those people should go to prison, shouldn't they?
Those people should go to prison. I would totally agree with you. My argument, though, is about people with extreme mental health, people who are shoplifting, career criminals who are basically in a space where they're providing through crime. I don't think they should be in prison. I think there should be more support for them. But
I think more people should be going to prison. I think that's what most people would want. When we're seeing all of the shoplifting going on...
So how many prisons do you want to build?
As many as we need. We've got to keep prison capacity in line with demand.
I mean, it's a really sad fact, but it's something that I've just sort of realised. Even if we emptied out all of the prisons of all of the prisoners now, there still wouldn't be enough spaces to house every rapist in this country. That's just one crime, one violent crime. Not that all of those rapes might be violent, but still, how can we possibly create a system that has enough beds and enough capacity to take on all of these individuals for any crime that somebody commits?
By making it easier to build things in this country, and that comes back to reforming planning. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to build infrastructure like prisons is because the planning system is so restrictive. It makes it very expensive for either the public sector or the private sector to build the infrastructure we need. That goes for railways, houses, telecommunications lines, and prisons, or things like hospitals. If we reform the planning system, we can make things easier to build. I think most people want to see the people who are committing crimes go to prison, and that is what I believe most people would like.
Well, this is the other issue and the criticism of rehabilitation and community sentences and those sorts of things. Are we forgetting the victims in this? If you are the shop owner who is perpetually stolen from by people with potentially addiction issues, potentially organised crime, but you're the victim of shoplifting, don't you want to see those people behind bars? Don't you want to see them punished for what they've done?
I'm about to make myself the most unpopular person on Channel 5 today.
Have a go?
Prison is about rehabilitation. We never created a prison system in this country purely for punishment. That's not the approach that we take to prison here. It's about it's about punishing people, it's about rehabilitating them, it's about getting them back into society. If you lock people away and throw away the key, it's at exorbitant, enormous cost to the taxpayer. And I think if we told the public how much it costs to keep people behind bars, they wouldn't be so pro for longer sentences. They'd be furious. They'd go, get out and go and get a job.
OK, so if we're saying that prison is there to rehabilitate and only have prisoners there that are in prison to keep the rest of community safe, so for violent criminals, we could take fraud, for example, as a crime. That's not a violent crime. You could give them a house arrest. They could do community sentencing. But if you are allowing someone to go back into the community where they committed that crime with all the resources that they had when they committed that crime, aren't you just allowing them to go back and continue doing it?
But that's the point of the rehabilitation, right? Because someone can go in for, say, if they got a year-long sentence, they only serve maybe 5 to 6 months of that, and then they're straight back out again and they're doing it all over again. If you have people, it's so unpopular to suggest house arrest because for some reason we think that means that, well, you've got your feet up, you're having a lovely time, you know, you're watching
TV
me here on Channel 5. But look, the reality is you can actually take away the luxuries in someone's house and they are stuck within those 4 walls, and that is, you know, they have to pay for their own living. That's actually a better punishment for someone who has been shoplifting or who has, you know, committed fraud than putting them behind bars.
That's also the other thing with the house arrest that always confuses me is who's paying their mortgage and who's paying their rent if they're not allowed to go out working, and maybe working is part of their sentence as well. They're forced to go out to work. They just can't go out after it or before it. Sally from Plymouth, what's your view on this? Do we need to be sending fewer people to prison? Does prison work, in your opinion?
Hi, morning. I think that maybe sending fewer criminals to prison could be a good idea. I think maybe doing a community service type thing could actually be really helpful, because I think a lot of people do get caught up in, you know, the cycle of going to prison and back again. Whereas if they were, you know, set up a job which would be helpful for them, helpful for the community, it's kind of useful for everybody, and maybe we could, in exchange, give them food or housing, and hopefully break that cycle so that they can live a better life. I don't know.
Who would these prisoners be then? Who do you think is in prison that shouldn't be?
I think maybe often like things like shoplifting, or some of the more minor crimes that perhaps they're doing it just because they can't get themselves out of their usual cycle, and if they have a purpose, like some kind of job or work that they can be doing, then maybe that can break it for them.
All right. I just wonder whether keeping them in the same communities when it was those surroundings that caused them to get into the crime in the first place is the best way round it. But certainly rehabilitation is what a lot of people are looking for. Sally, thank you very much for your call. Ian from North Ayrshire, what's your view on this?
Well, we're missing something here. We're not acknowledging that the judiciary, the people on the bench, that they make the decisions with offences committed and tariffs to meet the offence. We're living in a society at the moment, there's more criminality, more scams, more fraud, more crime on the streets, phones getting taken off people of all ages.
Ian, I actually think statistically there's less crime now than there was 10 years ago, but go ahead. There certainly feels like there's more. We're talking about it more, and more people are being sent to prison, and for longer, crucially, which is why our prisons are at capacity.
Well, the point is the word deterrence is the reason why there's more criminality, in my opinion. The sentences could be slightly longer. We're taking an element, we're letting out people who could benefit from prison with some degree of rehabilitation, but we're reducing the sentence and the time that they're going to get that.
Ian, I think you've got your stats wrong. It's actually completely the opposite. I know it feels like that, but we are sentencing more people to prison sentences. We are sentencing more people to significantly longer sentences, I think 40% in the last 10 years. And criminality, actual crimes, have gone down. So crime's gone down, but the number of people in our prisons has gone up.
Doesn't that show
do they
that prison
relate?
works, though?
Oh, well, that's what I was trying to...
If the sentences have got longer and more tough and crime has gone down, then Ian is right and prison works. And the issue is, it's always very popular to say to the public, we want to send more criminals to prison with tougher sentences. Very easy thing to do. You can do that at the stroke of a pen. But then when it comes to saying, right, well, that means we're going to have to spend more taxpayers' money on prisons, building prisons, making the conditions better, getting the programmes in there to have people rehabilitated, all of a sudden it's less popular. No one wants to go knocking on someone's door saying, we're going to raise your taxes to spend more money on prisoners. So it's like we're trying to sell the public a false dream that we can have tougher prison sentences with no more increase in public spending. We need both.
Actually, the way you described it there, if we're going to build bigger prisons, higher quality prisons with rehabilitation sort of built into that system, would you be adverse to that, Ava?
No, I'd be very pro that. I think it doesn't make sense to me to throw someone in a cell, throw away the key or whatever, and then release them a couple of years later, because they end up recommitting that crime. They end up right back in where they started, because you've not given them any boost or any helping hand. If you come out of prison and you're homeless and you've got no cash or family to fall back on, what are you going to do? You turn back to crime, and then you're in a cycle.
Well, I do suppose that could be another area that people could be focusing on, less on the time in prison, less on the rehabilitation maybe, and just making sure that that process from prison back into community, whether it's their old communities or a new community, is a bit more smooth and they've got more resources to fall back on. Ian, thank you very much for your call. Paul from Edinburgh, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are put the fines up higher. I've got put in prison because I never paid a fine.
Okay.
All they need to do was just increase my fine. Increase my fine. I've been tagged. I was the first person in Edinburgh to probably be tagged for a year. And I used to have to lie. I used to have a barrier. I used to have a barrier line, so I had my legs stuck in my house.
Right.
And the police just want to come and lift. They'll go to domestics, they'll go to this, they'll go to that, and you'll get lifted for that, and they'll keep you in for the weekend, and they're wasting their time. And then they're putting people in the jail for nothing. I got put in jail for fines, for no paying fines. Free to your cell, no TV, no nothing. All you had was a wee pot to pee in.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm slightly confused to your point, Paul. So you didn't pay a fine for whatever that was, and instead of the fine going up or you being compelled to pay the fine, which I don't know how they would manage to do that, they put you on house arrest with a tag, so you didn't actually face prison time, is that right?
No, twice they've put me in the jail for it. Where the fine was got, I said the fine will be paid, but they put you in the jail for it for no paying your fine.
Right, and you think they should just have
because of your circumstances, you might not have the money that week.
Right, so you think they should have just upped the fine, doubled your fine, made you pay it, and then let you be on your way. But how are they going to stop you from not paying your fine again, Paul, if that's all they have to do?
Put it up again.
So next time it's 3 times. That's a lot of admin for them.
Well, it's going to be cheaper than keeping people in jail.
It may be. I don't know how big the fine was. Paul, thank you very much for your call. Jerry from Cardiff, what's your view when it comes to... I mean, we've just heard from Paul from... He was tagged and... Jerry, he was tagged and sent to prison for not paying a fine. Is that the sort of things we want to see people in prison for?
Hello, Storm. I'd just like to say you're looking very well today.
Thank you very much. It's the makeup, I can assure you.
What I would like to say, Storm, is some years ago I was involved with a company called Scout Enterprise, and we took all the lads that were bad and drugs off the streets and took them into the wilderness, as we used to call it, and we built new scout huts for the scouts. Now, all these lads that I had with me were on drugs, they were on cannabis, they were sniffing glue, and while they were with me for a year, they never actually took any drugs, because we had drug tests to prove that they wasn't on drugs. And then after a year, the government wiped the floor with it and took it off. Now, the other thing is, it's like prisons. You got all these lads that are in prisons, and they're on about that we need extra prisons. Why don't we train the ones that are in prisons to build new prisons. And I think this would be marvellous for the prisons. It would take them out. They could be supervised. They could be trained. And if any of them are any good, they will come out of prison with a qualification.
Jerry, I'm not sure how much that would work in terms of cost. I think it would be far more expensive to build a prison in that way,
well,
but maybe it would work out long term because people would be skilled up in all those sorts of things and give them a better way of life after they get out of prison. I totally see where you're coming from, but your first discussion about the Scouts goes to a sort of bigger social question as to what can we do at grassroots level at the very beginning to make sure that we have less criminality long term. And I suppose that is the bigger, harder question to answer, but maybe a Scouts type club is exactly the sort of thing that could contribute positively to that. Jerry, thank you very much for your call. Don't forget later we're going to